Welcome to Elvenhome, and to this edition, which is 4 weeks after the last one. I sneaked in a break, not that I was intending to take one, but some things that I wanted to be able to make the brass kit of the church took a bit longer to get to me than normal. I think we've been so well served by not just Royal Mail but courier services, by the speed with which all the suppliers have been getting things out to us. And this was just one of those things where it took a while for things to be dispatched and then a while for them to arrive with me. And I didn't want to put a video up that didn't have enough decent content in it. As it happens, being put into enforced idleness helped me actually resolve something that had been niggling at the back of my mind for some time, and I'll come on to that in a few moments. The other thing that's in the video today is a look at how I'm doing in the developing of the plans for the engine shed, which are becoming clearer and clearer. I haven't got anything drawn yet, but I will be able to show you what the roof section, or at least the skeleton of the roof section, is going to look like, because some of the things I talked about in the last video have arrived. So let's take you on to the first section, which takes a look at curing a problem that has been niggling away at me for some time. Whilst I was sat in my enforced idleness as I was waiting for things to arrive, it's always dangerous for my mind not to have something to occupy it. Something which had been niggling me at the back of my mind for a long while became ever more niggling the more I looked as I had trains running, and also looking back at some of past running sessions I've done, which is the fact that this whole area here is uncovered, and in particular that you can see all the wiring that takes all the wires from the point motors and runs them down to the switches. Now, it has always been my intention at some point to cover it over, and I began to start the work on that. If I move across to here, this area here, this is the programming track, which sits on some brackets that sit below, and the brackets are screwed in to allow me to put this piece of foam board, it's several pieces of foam board together with Metcalf paper on, and that provides the wall there. It was never finished because it needs the capping stones put on it, and in any event I was going to do that when I got round to salting this. And I got to the point where really I could no longer tolerate this mess. It's not a mess, it's actually quite neat for me. If you saw what was under the baseboard, you would realise just how neat this is. But it does detract as you're looking, because they're bright red and yellow. It really does detract from trying to get the view onto the layout. Now, picking the time to do that when access to DIY stores is almost nil is perhaps not wise, but I was determined to use just the things that I had to hand to be able to put something in here which would at least get me by, even if at some point it got replaced. And after much cogitation, I decided that what I wanted to do was to have a board that would come out straight. It would be difficult to have it at an angle because of where these wires are. If I'd have thought about that sooner, then I might have placed these a bit lower down so that the wires drop down. But given where all this is, getting something that just came down to the lever frames really wouldn't work very well. So a board that sits in there that is held up somehow here, except I didn't have any brackets to be able to fit them on, which would then allow me also to continue the wall along the front, and then eventually to continue the wall up to this area here. That was what I had in mind. And so casting around for things to use, the first thing I needed to do was to find something that I could use for the top. I have some plywood around, but it's been stood for a while and was a bit bendy. And I didn't have much wood in the way to be able to use for battens. But I did have plenty of this stuff. If I just go there and just go in a bit closer for you temporarily, because the picture degrades when I do that. which is, it's 1 millimeter by I think 9 millimeters, which I've used. Can't remember where I used it on now, but I've used it on in other parts of the layout. So I needed some fairly thin wood to provide the board, and rather handily for me, let me just bring you back around and bring you out. Rather handily for me, I still had some of this knocking around, which for those of you who ever made IKEA bookshelves, this is the back of a bookshelf that came off a long while ago, and I faithfully promised that it would go back on. But part of it was used to create Grey Havens, and given that it now no longer fits the bookshelf, a part of it has now been used to provide the upper part of the board that will sit here. As you can see, I've glued on two supports. I've also screwed in a second block, which it just sits on top of the baseboard. It's not screwed in, unlike this one, which holds the board there in place. And that therefore gives me two supports for a board to sit on, which is then screwed into these two battens, and at the front there would be another leg that would give me that tripod outcome. And so that's what I've managed to produce. If I turn this upside down first of all, try and get most of it into shot. As you can see, the batten going along keeps the board straight. That's glued and screwed onto there, and then a leg coming down. And on the top, I've put some channel. This is actually channel, but that's going over the top of the screws because that was the neatest way to cover them. And it also provides a lip so that things won't roll off when I put anything on here. And I've obviously glued onto card and then onto the board, which has just been painted with some black paint I had around, the schematic for the points. It's a new version because I finally put in the Grey Havens loop as well, points 24 and 25, which were missing off the schematic that you may have seen knocking around there. And that sits in place there. It's held in place by two brass screws. And then using some more Metcalf paper and the foam board, if I just show you here, this is still in process of being made because I needed some more channel, which Eileen's Emporium, bless it, delivered to me yesterday. That will sit in there once we get this into position. And just line that up again because I've pressed that down. There we go. And then finally, on the far edge, you'll see those two pieces of Velcro here. I've got one more piece of foam board covered in the paper card, and that will sit, and obviously because it's Velcro, I can position it so that it's level. That probably isn't at the moment, and it's a bit low. And then I will put some capping on the top, which will be the same channel as it is here, and I'll obviously saw lines in to break them up to individual stones, and the capping will then run all the way from that corner piece along the whole of the front, and I will use the capping to fit this in place because it fits very snugly over the card and the foam board. So that will hold everything in place because, of course, as with everything else, I've got to be able to remove this and the walls if I need to take this board off to 10-20 points underneath, for which I hope I will not need to do. Now, I don't think I'll have this finished before this video goes out, but I will have it finished by next week because what needs to be done now is to put on the capping, and that will need to be painted up and marked up, and also to put the buttresses on, which will be positioned to cover over where the pieces of card currently meet up. And once I've done that, I can then also do the scenic work that I want to do on the very edge of this board. If I take this off again, this one, and just go along here, you'll see that the ballast, if I go in a bit more, the ballasting has been done not quite to the edge, mainly because I thought it would all just fall off the edge. But that now will be really easy to fill in with earth and goodness knows what else, and some bushes. And the bushes will be nicely away from the side of the line, but will help covering the wall from the opposite side, and generally give an edge to everything when I'm trying to take shots, running shots, and just generally make the thing look rather nice. So that's what I had to turn my hand to, and I'm quite pleased with the outcome. I really think it makes a big difference when trains are running, as trains run by, for them, even with the wall without the capping on. It really does make a difference. Let's see if I can get something to come and run past it now. Of course, this is the moment where nothing will work as it's meant to. But rather than having your eye taken by the red and yellow wires that were there before, you now get a much better view, and I think it does just look so much better, because it is the train that takes your eye, not the nest of wiring. There you go, I told you. The train has come away, the locomotive has come away from its train. Okay, well, I will put it on the naughty step. Right, that's the end of this section. So let's go on and take a look at the latest thoughts about the build of the new engine shed. As you will recall from my last few videos, I've decided that I'm going to build the engine shed that sits at Weathertop Depot, and that I want a single building which stretches across the 4 tracks that currently go into 2 separate engine sheds. In the last video I mentioned that I was waiting for things to arrive, and I think the only thing that I'd actually received was the brass windows and skylights, which I got from PD Models, which are here, which, as I think I mentioned, I haven't yet fully measured them, but I think they would fit in one of the Metcalf kits were you to get that. What you see in front of you is the other things that have now arrived, and so my thinking is developing all the time. On here are the trusses and girders that I mentioned I was ordering from York Model Rail. Yes, York Model Rail. Yes, I'll bring one up to the camera so you get a better view of it. I just love the look of this. The slight bow that sits there, that is going to be, I think, excellent for being able to raise and have possibly a few pieces of very thin strip styrene to provide louvres essentially, to allow smoke to escape. As you can see, I've set out here five of the trusses set out at about 2 inches apart, which is almost perfect for the length of the girders. I bring one of the girders in. This is obviously laser cut, and I'm really pleased with them. This length is very slightly less than the length I was going to, let's get this to go into focus on it, than the length I was going to go to on my original intention. So I think what I will do is that this will now be the length of the shed. This will be pretty much the arrangement for one of the bays of 2 tracks that run in through the centre. There will then be an area in the middle, which will be a workshop area, and then there'll be a second bay exactly like this here, and that will give you the full extent of the workshop. Here you will see from scenic this is actually a station support kit, but I'm pretty sure I can do something with this to provide at least cosmetically, to provide the supports on which the roof will stand. I don't think these will be strong enough in themselves, even if I make a cross piece out of these, which you can do by putting those 3 pieces together. I doubt they'll be strong enough to take the weight of the roof, but I'll be able to put some girders in which will give the weight of the roof being borne by some down supports, and then I can put these in particularly along the centre here to provide some kind of architectural embellishment. So we'll see how that turns out once I do that. The good thing, I think, is that I'm getting closer and closer to being able to see this thing, and then I can get to a piece of paper and start working out what the measurements and things will need to be. The other thing, which I think I may have mentioned in the last video, is that this build is more complicated than any I've done before, because you will be able to see the inside of this building. This means that fixing windows and anything like that is going to require more consideration, because the window is going to have to be wholly encapsulated in a wall that has both an inside and an outside. So I need just to think how I'm going to do that. I did have an idea of using strip styrene channel, if there was one that was where the gap of the channel was small enough, but the smallest that there is too big, and the window would rattle around if I used one of these frames in there. So I just need to go back to square one a little bit about how I'm going to set in the windows so that when you look on the inside, they are also set into the window. And that, I think, just means a double skin wall, and finding some way to hold these, or to put spaces in between the two wall bits so that the wall isn't bumpy as it goes over the top of the windows. So this is, I think, as a build, I think I've said before, this is going to take me a long time, not least because I really want to work out how I'm going to build this thing before I set out, because I suspect there is yet more things to be bought to enable me to complete the build. But the fact that I can now at least see what the roof is going to look like, and begin to also think about how I'm going to light this building. I think it will be similar to the High Elven station, using the layouts for you lamps that I used before, suspended from the bottom of these trusses, but that all depends how high up the trusses are going to be themselves. So lots to think about, still lots more to do, and by the time you come back for the next video, I hope that I will have got further on even more with my plans for the build of this engine shed. Well, that just about wraps up this edition of Elvenhome. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and it's good to be back making the videos. I do enjoy doing them. If you've got any comments that you'd like to leave, please do leave comments, because, as I've said, they're always so helpful to me as I think about how I'm going to develop parts of the layout. And if you haven't already subscribed, well, please do subscribe and hit the like button, because that all helps. And make sure you press the little bell so you know when I'm going to be uploading. But until I speak to you again in about, I hope, a fortnight's time, by which time I think, have also got on with the kit of the church, that's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.